Now, I'm a geographer by training, so I do feel something of an interloper here. But although I can't see any of you, Tom does assure me you're a very friendly bunch, and I'm looking forward to explaining Build Its work to you. So over the next 45 minutes, I'm going to describe our approach to entry-level construction skills training in Zambia, what we call training into work. And in doing that, I'll emphasize how we deliver training, particularly through our community building program. And we call this a livelihoods approach. There's lots of photographs. There are a couple of short videos and even some music. So I really hope you enjoy this evening. Now, a few introductions. The first one is to our mission statement on screen there. We're all about creating opportunities for young people in their communities through skills training, work experience, and essential community projects. Right, that's the first intro. I thought I'd also say a bit more about me. Okay. A few things about me, which not even Tom knows. First of all, I live in Shropshire. That's lovely Shropshire, a rural county in the west of England. That's looking towards Wales. A couple of months ago, lots of hills and rivers here. That's my house. That's where I live. And bottom right is where I'm working from at the moment, as we're still in lockdown in terms of offices and things. My main hobby is cycling, so my friends will see me on a bike like that quite a lot, cycling around the lovely county and into Wales when we're allowed to. My second passion, amongst others, is making marmalade. I don't know where you're calling in from, but that's a big thing of mine. And finally, here's my dog, Rika. So that's a little bit about me. I think also it's right to introduce Zambia. For those of you who aren't familiar, a landlocked country in Southern Africa. That's where it is, bordering, I think, 10 different countries. Zimbabwe's to the south. Famous for, previously called, prior to independence in 1964, Northern Rhodesia. And I suppose most famous for two things. The first is the Victoria Falls, which cross between Zambia and Zimbabwe. There they are. And the second, copper. Copper is the main export of Zambia, responsible for most of its foreign exchange earnings, and still dominates the economy. So when copper goes up in price, things are generally better in Zambia and vice versa. Okay, we're going to start off with a short video. It's just 90 seconds long. It was not made for tonight's lecture. It's a general introductory video to Build Its work. Look out for the cyclists. Here we go.
We are going to have a very fantastic time. You are very much welcome. Please.
Built it international, built as a science laboratory. It has created a bigger difference in the academic life of our children. It means even learner performance has greatly improved.
Welcome to the Centre for Excellence. Behind me is a 2-hectare site where Build Its flagship project for the next few years is starting to take shape.
Pois há mais skills a kusambira pano wengi. Pois pano pari ama courses yari po pari plastering, pari bricklaying na painting na carpentry.
Our trainees are some of the best out there, which makes them highly employable.
People are getting supplies like, wow, I can't wait to sleep in a house built by women. So I was very high, I felt nice.
Tulina bampeera na future ya kuisunga n'okwafa ulikorwa.
we are actually achieving a lot of things, and we've seen lives being transformed, young people being empowered.
Okay, a few moving images there from some of our recent work, and nice to see my colleague Sugra in that video. Okay, so a little bit more about us. We're a UK and Zambia non-government organisation, or not-for-profit. We're small. Our turnover is around $1.5 million. We have 30 staff, the majority in Zambia, delivering our programme of training and construction. We are supported by mainly private money through grant makers like the Happel Foundation and individual supporters like yourselves, but we also now tap into some statutory aid money through the European Union and Irish Aid in particular. Those are our values on screen there. Empowerment. At the end of the day, we're all about empowerment, eliminating poverty in young people's lives, giving them a future, a livelihood, a skill. We're not about construction per se, but that's where we focus our livelihoods training. So far, we've completed over 50 projects, trained over 1,200 young men and women, and we reckon that that will impact on over 300,000 people over the life of those projects. Why Zambia? Okay, well, some stats on screen there. Essentially, it's a poor country. As you can see from the GDP figures there, most people live in what we would describe as poverty. Very few have a stable income, a young population, and very high youth under and unemployment. It's a pretty tough place to grow up, and a good place for us to work because it's relatively stable politically and to some degree economically, so you can get things done. It would be wrong of me not to touch on COVID and the impact it's had on our work. The graph there shows the second wave in Zambia. That's the South African variant, but as you can see from the numbers on screen, they're very modest compared with the UK, certainly, and most other places. The real numbers will be significantly higher, but it is true to say that the impact of COVID so far in Zambia and Southern Africa has been less than feared. It's definitely there, but translating into the same levels of morbidity and mortality as here doesn't seem to be happening. We're not over yet. Couple of other, one point just to stress about that. We were forced to close our training program for 4 months last year and again in January this year on a government directive, and we've had delays to our building programs. Zambia is on the red list, so we can't visit. So it's not an easy situation at all. The good news is that the vaccination program started earlier this week. It's just started. Right now, the economy isn't in a great place. It's essentially stagnant, and with a population growth rate of over 2%, that means it's getting poorer right now. Okay, a little bit about the construction sector and training. This is our space. So the few things on the screen here. The sector is estimated to employ around 200,000 people, but the majority are in the non-formal, unregulated construction sector, working in the compounds and rural areas rather than under formal contracts, if you like. Just 3% of workers from surveys are female. The sector is reckoned to need at least 17,000 new recruits each year to cope with retirement and with growth, but is only training to a certified level a fraction of that. In terms of construction companies, you can see from the graph there, from the histogram chart there, there are around 5,000 registered construction companies, most of them tiny, level 6 in the categorization, with just 215 at the highest level, most of whom are foreign companies. The government trade schools that were active in the 1960s and 70s have lost a lot of ground and are now poorly resourced and producing very few trained people. Most who do receive any training are coming through the private sector or the not-for-profit sector. Clearly, there is a huge, huge need here for skilled labour. Our response to this situation, Well, we had a major review that shifted us from being a community building organization doing some training to a training organization doing some building. This took place in 2016, 2017, and when we took the decision to focus on training. And that meant that if we were going to get some serious numbers through our program, we couldn't rely on having a building project to provide work experience, because our program has 3 elements to it. After selection, there is a life skills or work-ready skills component. Then there's the actual trade skill, the technical training, and then there's work experience, either on one of our projects or primarily these days through a work placement. Those are the 3 key elements. So life skills, there's a photo. This is all about personal organization, knowing how to turn up and ready for work, working in teams, following instructions, looking after yourself, the stuff everyone needs to have in order to succeed in the workplace beyond a technical skill. The trade, they are the technical trade. There's brick and block laying, and we'll come on to a list in a second. 60 to 70 days of formal education, theory and practice, and then drill to get you to a level of competency where you're ready to go on a work placement. And work placement of at least 3 months is what we aim to offer. It's essentially a modest and simple apprenticeship scheme. But the key thing is that there was no apprenticeship schemes in Zambia when we conceived this, and we had to do a lot of research and persuasion with employers that this was worth doing. We're currently working with around 30 companies who offer work placements. We do not offer cheap labor. Those employers must pay the minimum wage at least to the young men and women coming through our program. Who do we train? Okay, so a typical trainee will probably be in the early 20s, probably got a primary school level education, but not much more. Certainly no tertiary education or vocational skills. They've probably never had any formal employment. Around 25% are women. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. This is Ruth, who was persuaded to go on our program by her grandparents, with whom she lived. She didn't want to, but she did, and she helped to build the new school in her community. She then entered a bricklaying competition, actually, and she won 3rd place and ended up going to Abu Dhabi to represent Zambia in the World Skills Program. So she's been on quite a journey, and there's more to share on her. She is a builder and a tiler now. One key aspect of trainee selection, and really important in terms of monitoring impact, is poverty. As I said, we are about reducing poverty, and we are about, creating new livelihoods. We use a technical tool called Progress Out of Poverty. Some of you may have heard of it. And that, rather than talking about income, looks at information benchmark for Zambia, specific to Zambia, to give you a score that's more interested in issues such as the size of your household, the level of education of the most senior female in the household, what type of energy you use for cooking, and then some assets. Do you own a TV? What type of pressing iron do you use? That's an interesting one. Do you own a cell phone? And how many mattresses are there in your house? So those have been identified by PPI as relevant to poverty in Zambia, and you get a score. So we look for our trainees to be scoring 40 or less, which gives us a very high likelihood that they're under the poverty line. And I think around 80% of our trainees meet that criteria. There's a few to the right. You can see the white line just in the middle of the graph there, which is giving us an indication of our target group to the left. So we're doing reasonably well there. A higher score indicates a lower likelihood of being poor. A lower score, a higher likelihood. Right, let's talk about how we've developed our program then. And this is really the crux of what we brought to the party, if you like, against a background of out-of-date courses and that haven't changed much since the 1960s and that are not respected by employers. So the current system is very weak and doesn't really do the job. We took the decision to start again, to talk to employers, find out what materials they use, what skills they require, where the shortages are, and what kind of speeds and competencies and standards they're looking for. We then adapted some training material from the UK for the Zambian context, and we tested that through pilot schemes and refined it with employer feedback. We were supported in all of this by Carillion Training Services, who of course don't exist anymore when the parent company went under, I think around 3 years ago now. But they lent us their technical expertise and really helped us to start to build the systems and processes and content to offer a quality learning experience. We're now signed up with NOCN, the National Open College Network, the largest construction skills awarding body in the UK that operates internationally. Their awards are available in India, Nigeria, South Africa. They're not available in Zambia, but they endorse our program. So they provide an external quality assurance service to us, sampling and checking our testing to make sure that our standards are maintained. There is some theories you can see in the photograph there, but most of the work is practicing. You do not have to be literate to join our program. And there's a list of some of the courses we've managed to put together. We generally develop a new course each year. The basic building course is what takes place at the construction projects, but at the training centre itself, we're coming on to that. And we've got 5 or 6 courses there that we're delivering. Okay, so we took the decision to become a training organisation, and we realised that we couldn't get significant numbers of trainees through our own construction programme. Too expensive, had to raise the capital for buildings. So we took the decision to set up a training centre. Bura Happold and Gensler were instrumental in supporting the original concept and design work here. It's a large 2-hectare site on the outskirts of Lusaka. There's the master plan. That's in its second iteration, Tom, so it has moved on a bit. The green bits are completed. The orange bits are in progress. Actually, some of that's done already. And the purple bits are required to finish phases 1 and 2. And that will leave us some space on the site for future buildings. Our vision is not just a facility to allow us to provide our own training courses, but with also the capacity to offer space to other training organisations and work in collaboration with others. We're looking for this to be a hub, a centre for excellence. We're not promising we're always excellence, but it's a centre to promote high standards and to encourage others to come and learn and copy and do their own thing at our site. And it's already very much on the map. It's on a main road out of Lusaka, on the Great North Road at 10 miles, if you know Zambia. Highly visible, a constant stream of visitors and attracting a lot of attention. The whole project will be around $2 million to complete phases 1 and 2. We're about 70% of the way there and should reach a capacity of 25,000 training days per annum. We're at about 15 to 16,000 at the moment. Okay. So we had a little bit of fun designing the various buildings on the site with our professional friends. We wanted to use the opportunity to showcase sustainable design and material choices in the different buildings on the site. So there is a theme there. There is a theme, but all the buildings are different. And you can see a few there. We've got one of our learning plazas with SSB stabilized soil blocks. We're going to talk a bit more about those, and a bunch of bricklaying trainees doing their stuff. We also have on the bottom right, that's a higher spec indoor learning space and conference space with an elevated roof for natural ventilation. We don't use any air conditioning on any of our buildings. And we use quite a lot of gun poles and screens as well, just to emphasize some local materials. The building bottom left was designed by Arup. That is a student toilet block to be built this year. Some rainwater harvesting, solar power, and other interesting things going on in there. So Tom's colleagues who were on secondment to us were involved in these buildings. There is a higher grade visitor toilet block. And you can see those water bottle lights. You may have seen those in the past, refraction of daylight through to the inside of the building. And then on the left, that's one of my favorites. That's a plastic bottled retaining wall. Those, discarded plastic bottles filled with earth, and then creating an external structure there. That's actually lemongrass growing on top of it, which I'm told is good for repelling snakes, which is apparently a problem. So we've had some fun on the design side. Okay, I now want to talk a little bit more about our community building projects. This is where we started, a community building organization. Almost 3,000 communities in Zambia have children learning in places like this, mainly in rural areas. It's pretty shocking. And we played a small part in upgrading those facilities. We work very closely with communities on the design and location variables. We work in coordination with the government because they will send teachers once there's a decent building there, particularly if there's a house. The community will contribute around 15% of the total cost of an upgrade through their labour, generally clearing a site and collecting the raw materials we need. And that's where we started, and we still deliver 3 or 4 of these projects each year. Fairly soon, we looked to respond to the challenge of standards, of raising build standards, which are generally pretty poor, largely because building regulations don't really exist. Yes, in some of the urban areas, you'll need planning permission, but you're unlikely to get a building regs inspection, and certainly not at all in the rural areas. So you really need to set your own standards. And particularly if you're running a training program, it's really important that trainees witness and learn about what's good, not what's just acceptable. So we have a standard details book. A company called Founded helped us with that. We're going to see a few references. So these are the sort of standard details that we would generally see in any building that we build. We also have some standard designs now after sort of 7 or 8 years of trial and error. So that's a 3 classroom block on screen, 3 64 square meter classrooms. There's an office, what they call a strong room for exam papers, a veranda and a ramp. And that's the kind of basis of our school block. Here's a couple of slides showing some more details, because I know we've got lots of engineers on the call tonight, on the meeting tonight. I thought you'd like to see a little bit about how we've evolved to design sort of an appropriate design. People can copy this and use it. You know, it's friendly for the local context, but also raises standards. So there's 4 things going on here in this detail, which I hope you can see. We've got a ring beam at the top, holding the building together, single skin building. That's not always found, but we've introduced that to give some structural integrity to the building. Moving down the right-hand side, this is one of my favorites. We've done away with the traditional 10 centimeter screed, sand cement screed, which generally leads to erosion and sort of holes all over the floor, however sound the slab might be. So we've designed that out, and we now use a steel float finish, as you can see in the photograph. And for a school, that's absolutely fine. It's quite tricky, but it's a good skill to learn. It works really well. Follow the slab through the wall, and you'll see the ant guard, 10 centimeter overhang there of the slab. This is to deter the ants, which can crawl up the wall and eat your rafters or your roof touches. So that ant guard apparently helps that, and it does work. And then last of all, on the far left, circled in green, the word slope. So we experimented with various drainage designs with limited success, and we've settled on a simple sloping apron to push water away from the building, usually made from brick. That is the most effective, most robust solution. It will depend on ground conditions, obviously, but that's our preferred solution there. So that gives you some idea of how seriously we've taken the design challenges. Our masonry of choice is the stabilized soil block. many of you will be familiar with this. We have used both hand pressed versions, but also hydroform. We've got a video clip coming up of a hydroform machine. We use this because it uses the soil that you've excavated from the foundations. Generally speaking, laterite soils in our part of the world in Zambia are perfect. You will add a small amount of cement, depending on the clay content, usually 5 to 6, maybe 7% cement. That really is to create waterproofing for external walls rather than, the strength. We aim for 2.5 neutrons. That's absolutely fine. They're really only carrying their own weight. They're very durable, they're very good looking, and they work really, really well for us. So I'm now going to show another video. It's around 30 seconds long. It's quite noisy. You might want to turn your volume down. This is a hydroform machine, which is a diesel-powered stabilized soil block maker. We're not responsible for the quality control here. This is sort of subcontracted out. But you can see what I'm talking about now. Good. I hope you found that interesting. You will, the eagle-eyed will have noticed the interlocking feature on those blocks. We tend these days to use the straight block without the interlocking because although that's a great feature, removes the need for mortar. In fact, because we're essentially building this project to meet both the community need but also the training need, our trainees need to learn to lay line and level. They need the practice. So we do mortar, even though it's slightly more expensive, to give them that practice. Roofing has always been a bit of a headache for us. We used locally made cement tiles, but struggled with the quality control. We now use IT4 metal sheeting, sometimes with the whirligig for ventilation, but that will depend on location. But we have standardized the roof trusses. In fact, starting point was the standard piece of sawn timber, and that formed the basis of the design of a roof truss, which led to the then dimensions of the classroom. And you can see here that we've introduced a gusset plate. You would not find that on most buildings in Zambia to retain rigidity, and then it's all treated as well for termite protection. We've actually introduced a padstone element instead of one of the bricks where the truss is resting, and then it flows through into a veranda. That works really well for us. A good roof as well as good foundations, obviously, absolutely essential. Okay, so these community projects are training projects as well as providing a school. And so there's a rotation system. Our trainer will visit a project for a week every month and take the trainees through in small groups through the next stage of the learning process, the curriculum, and then they're back on site working under a contractor. It's a labour-only contract. We have our own site agent who's responsible for managing the project in terms of the work plan, the resource schedule, the labour schedule, the material, the equipment schedule. That's all our budget and expenditure and all that. So we do that, but we do have a contractor on site, and this is a very tried and tested approach that works really well for us. There you go. And here's a finished school, Nalianda School, north of Lusaka, completed in 2019. And I just wanted to take a few moments just to share the impact that a building like this can have. From very humble origins, the school now is on the map. It's recognized by the government. There are now 14 teachers there, believe it or not, and that's massively increased. It's expanded its teaching grade, and as a result, the enrollment's gone through the roof, which creates further problems in terms of capacity. Essentially, it's 2 schools in one, a morning school and an afternoon school. But the whole project has lifted this community to another level. It's very exciting to see that difference being made, as well as the 20 trainees who come through the program. We also do health clinics, and we've done secondary schools. We're very, every school gets sanitation facilities and hand washing facilities. Not got time to go into that, but it's the whole package that we offer. I wanted to share this because it's something I've been quite excited around the last couple of years. We have had various attempts to design what we call an affordable house. We're calling it a low income house now. Affordable is too sort of subjective, and we've settled on this design. It's gone through 3 pilots. This is a simple 2-bed house that can be expanded. It's not modular as such, but you can tack on extra bedrooms along the horizontal axis. The key thing that the design's been driven down to mean that it costs around $12,000 per unit. It is 55 square meters, including the external kitchen. Bottom right, that's the profile from the back. Traditional way of cooking is outside, so that works well. There's also a flush latrine, bottom left, you can see, with some rainwater collection, and then a porch at the front. It's single pitch with insulation. It's got the trowel finished floor. It's really good value, and I see great potential actually for us in a country where there are absolutely massive shortage of housing units, affordable housing units. There's plenty of mileage for a design like this if somebody at scale takes it on, and we can provide the workers who know how to build it. That would be our contribution. I wanted to show these because I think it's interesting. We have had some experimentation with rammed earth. Some of you may be interested in rammed earth. Obviously, no cement involved here. Quite an appropriate design technology, choice of material for Zambia. With good carpentry skills, it's a pretty cheap way of building, but it's not the norm. And for a school, we found that the school suffered from the robust behavior of the children in the classrooms, gave it quite a beating. So whilst it's absolutely fine, we haven't pursued this solution, but it was a great thing to try out at our Shipungu school. Right, on to some challenges now. So one of the main challenges we have is health and safety. This has been a huge headache for us over the years, trying to work to an acceptable standard where the context is working against you. Health and safety does not really exist in any kind of organized way. And over a number of years, we've developed our own, and we are by no means perfect, but it is drilled into our training program and into our site agents. And this took me about 3 years to get right. There we are. This is an excavation for a pit latrine. There's the standard detail top right from our details book. And there it is in practice. But it took a long time to get there. And I'm very proud that we have moved forwards here. It is a constant worry that people are safe on site. So we do put a lot of effort into this challenge. The other challenge, another big challenge, which I think is a very, very interesting one for us, and it's seeing the kind of coalescing of our construction program and training program. It's hard to get good contractors, really hard. And what we've found is that maybe 1 in 3 of the external contractors we've used, we've retained. They've kind of understood what we're looking for, the standards we're aiming for, and in particular, how to integrate training into a delivery program rather than just get in and out as quickly as possible. But in the end, you know what's happening? We are using our own graduates. Now we're kind of 7-8 years into a training program, and we're using our own graduates to build to manage our build projects. And there are some of them, male and female. And I think pretty much all our contractors now have come through our program, which is a very satisfying thing to be able to share with you. And of course, it gives us the chance to extend our training program into site management skills beyond bricklaying skills and what have you. And these guys go on to develop their own small businesses. And this is definitely the way forwards for us. Okay, I've got about 5 minutes left, and I want to turn to impact. Impact is really important for NGOs, for all people. And it's not just about being able to say to donors, people who fund our work, look, this is the difference we've made with your support. It's also about learning. It's really, really important that we listen to the experience of those who come through our program and find out how we can get better at what we do, and we kind of have an annual cycle of reflection and learning, and it's built largely on an independently commissioned annual survey of those who've come through our program. So here's a few statistics to share with you. What is the impact of our livelihoods program? Well, the international definition of poverty is a rather crude US dollars 190 a day. So those stats do reflect that, but we've got more sophisticated ways of looking at our impact. So there you can see at baseline, when trainees come into our program, we do find out what their income is. We estimate it, and you can see the figures are pretty low. So the last survey in 2020, which took trainees who graduated 1 year ago, 2 years ago, and 5 years ago, and they're all mixed up here, sample of 180. So the number of trainees who had reached that $1.90 a day in Kwacha terms, the local currency, 41% female, 63% male. And we have a comparison group of, these are people who have not been through our training program from a similar background. There you go, 13%, 28%. So you can see a big divergence there. This diagram's got quite a lot in it, this graph. Okay, so what we're talking about here is income, gross monthly income, averaged over the 3 months prior to the survey. And we're comparing baseline, the figures on the left, with current income on the right. And the figure in the middle is the amount of that current income that's generated from construction, which, as you can see, is not 100%, but generally speaking is the majority of income. People tend to have, you know, a diverse sources of income, even if they've got one main source. It gives you a little bit more insurance to change. So the figures on the left are the monthly Kwacha incomes at baseline. The poverty line is the red line. That was 570 Kwacha 2 years ago. It's now 1078 because it's based on the dollar and the currency is devalued. So we can see that all three groups there from 1 year ago, 2 years ago, and 5 years ago at baseline were below that red line, below the poverty line. And we can see now that they are significantly above it. The most startling increase is in those from 2 years ago, now income sort of fivefold up at 2,566 a month. Okay, you've got to take inflation off that, but a massive net increase. And 1 year ago as well. And the majority of those trainees have come through our Centre for Excellence in Lusaka. The yellow figures are from 5 years ago. They're not performing as well. They are from our community build program from 5 years ago, so mainly in rural areas. And although that gross income figure is less impressive, although it's gone up a lot, 1,500 Kwacha in a rural area where you don't pay rent and you don't have to buy your own food because you grow it, goes a long way. So those are average incomes. That's not everybody, but they clearly demonstrate really big, significant changes. Here is some information as we get more information on the recent new courses on average monthly income by skill. And there you can see how carpentry is standing out. That is the most lucrative of the skills we train in. And so we'll be placing more emphasis on that. Our return on investment, if you like, how long does it take an uplift in income to be the equivalent of the cost of training? And the current cost is around £1,200 per person. That's probably about $1,500. Somewhere between 1 and 3 years, depending on the course. Now, you'll recognize this graph from earlier on in the presentation where we talked about how we assess poverty using the PPI score. So there's that familiar graph again, with the majority of our trainees at baseline to the left of the 40 mark. Okay, so we're now going to look at the same PPI questionnaire and the scores updated from the survey. And there you go. The purple showing a much more even distribution and general shift to the right up the scale. Okay, so 84% of our trainees were below that threshold score on baseline, and it's now about 50%. So this, a more sophisticated indicator, is showing that 2 years down the line, sorry, 1 year down the line, you know, around 30% change there, from 80 to 50% in poverty. We don't have targets for this because there are so many other factors at play that affect individual circumstances. What we're looking for is the general picture, and we can say with some certainty that we are reducing poverty. Just here's a nice little story from a young man called Elias, who's now flying along with his own construction company. And what I like about this is that, you know, 3 years down the line, he was trained in 2017. He hasn't just got married and has children now, but he employs other people, and those other people are also graduates of our training program. There he is receiving his certificate. That's not me in the photo, by the way, behind him. Okay, another challenge to share with you, fighting prejudice against women. There is a lot of prejudice against women in the construction sector. I don't think that's specific to Zambia, but it's very difficult for women to be accepted in the workforce. And you could say, well, why are we trying to get women into construction program? Well, it kind of grew out of our buildings work as we moved across into training. And 25% women in our program is an amazing achievement. But the fact is that income-wise and poverty-wise, they don't do as well in general as men. There's Ruth actually there, who we met earlier. She's giving a kind of motivation talk to a new group of female trainees in our program. She's now at university, actually. She's one of our stellar performers. It is our organization's objective to achieve a 50-50 balance, and the graph there on the right shows we're aiming to get there by about 2024. In order to do that, we will need to greatly increase our soft skills training, our life skills training for women, so that they're more resilient to deal with the challenges that they particularly are going to face. But we're also going to have to expand our range of courses and find new courses where women are more likely to earn a good income. Plumbing is one of them. We're doing stores management, health and safety. We're looking at those ideas. So we'll continue to do our basic core construction trades, but we'll be adding to that. And the mix on each course is going to vary significantly. And then lastly, working closely with employers, introducing our graduates to work opportunities and getting an opportunity to show what you can do and get your foot in the door. That's 2 slides to go. Yeah, our relationship with employers is really important. It's the cornerstone of the program in many ways. We don't yet get them to pay for trainees, but they do pay the trainees who work with them. We've got 30 companies now heavily involved in our program, not just taking work placements, but actually using us as a sort of recruitment agency. Over 200 workers requested last year, and we can make that introduction. And we want to try and monetize that. We're sort of in the middle, so we can start to think about charging a placement fee. We've not really got there yet, but lots of opportunity, I think. And then finally, in conclusion, I talked about, you know, a livelihoods approach to skills training and construction. Here's a few just sort of summary points to share with you before we close. Clearly, the construction sector in Zambia needs skilled workers. It's not producing them. And the training programs need to more specifically meet the market requirements. We're finding we're having to set our own standards there. We can't rely on the national standards. Delivering training through a building project works, but it's very expensive. So we've got to find more opportunities for work placements and employer engagement. We know that if we get it right, the impact on poverty is fast and sustained. We know it works. In many ways, it's a kind of open goal, because if you've got a certified skill, you're going to find work in Zambia. And lastly, we do need to keep exploring more options for women to make sure they're as successful as their male counterparts. So that's it. Thank you very much for listening to me. I hope you've enjoyed the last 45 minutes. If you would like to stay in touch with us, which would be fantastic, you can sign up to our occasional e-newsletter through the contact page on our website. We have an ongoing program of online events. We'd love to hear from you. Please do stay in touch. Thank you.
We've got a few questions that have come in, and I've also got several myself. But let's start one of the questions that's come in was, have you worked with the local education question system in Zambia in the development of your courses? How is it linked into the governmental systems?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that question. So there are national curriculums and an awards, an awards recognition system. At the bottom is what's called the trades test level 3. And we used that in our early days, but we were finding that about 50% of the content wasn't relevant, and there were chunks missing that were relevant. So we don't do that anymore. We essentially developed our own courses. Now we have to keep the government on board through the vocational training department of the Ministry of Education. They actually regulate us, so we need to stay good friends, and we do work closely with them. But we are in the process of registering our courses now, and that will allow us to share them. And I think it's a question of sharing the credit a little bit, maybe unfairly, but we'll do it to keep everyone happy. We're in final stage negotiations with the qualifications authority, but we've got a good working relationship, and they send people up to see us all the time. So it's a good relationship, but we're fairly independent.
And another one of the questions is, because you said there are 3,000 schools that need or communities that have schools or substandard school buildings. How do you decide which ones to work with?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we will try and cluster projects. We're down in Livingston at the moment for efficiency. What we'll do is we'll go to the local district education board and we'll say, how many community schools in your area? They'll say there's 50. We'll say, which ones would you like to see upgraded? In other words, which ones will you send a teacher to if there's a house and a decent classroom? They'll say, here's a list of 15. And then we'll go off and appraise those ourselves. And we're looking primarily to see that, you can realistically deliver a project there, it's accessible and the raw materials are available, but more so it's to do with that the community is ready to play their part. Mm-hmm. They're fired up, they're going to play their part. That's essential. And if they're not ready, we'll say, right, come and tell us when you are. So that's it, a sort of a tight focus for 2 or 3 years, and then we go through that process.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting, just to build on that. So it's because everything you have talked about is about long-term strategic work, that rather than short interventions and walking away. If you see what I mean, is that? Can you just give me what are your thoughts on how long it actually takes to make a difference in Zambia? What's the length of your program that you foresee? How long are you?
Okay, well, you mean as on a project level or as an organisation?
Well, both really. What's the end game, and how long does it take to really develop a project and deliver one? And
well, so on the project level, if we selected well, Tom, then the government will send teachers, the school gets gazetted, and they're in the system. Now the system isn't brilliant, but they're in the system, rather than being outside the system and essentially throwing a bit of petty cash every now and then. So that by selecting carefully, an investment at the right point takes the school over that threshold. So that's really critical strategically. In terms of our engagement, we say that that there's probably 6 to 12 months prep work and everything lined up, probably 8 or 9 months construction, and then we stay involved actually with a hand-holding role for a couple of years. We do some sort of we have a local organisation does some environmental training and puts school gardens in and plants lots of trees and things, which is great. We help the community, the PTA equivalent, which is supporting the school to get make sure they get what they should get from the district education board. So there's we will actually provide desks and books. We didn't at first, but the government didn't, so we just decided to. So probably a 3-year engagement there, Tom, and then we'll move on. And then interestingly, in our impact study, I didn't share this, but part of the impact study is to go back 5 years later and find out what's going on. So we've got lots of stats on increased numbers and things. In terms of a training institution, how long should a training institution be around for? Well, the simple answer is forever, because it should evolve to change what it does to meet changing requirements. So, we are creating a quality entry-level skills training institution. Now, we haven't cracked how that's funded indefinitely, but we're starting to sell some training. That's a big question, and there's lots of dimensions to it: governance, income, actual management, and we are working on those. But I'm not ashamed to say it will need external funding going forwards, just like all further education the colleges do in the UK. So one has to be reasonable.
Yes. No, and building on that, so Stefan has asked, do you have any plans to establish training centres elsewhere in other parts of the country or in other places?
Good, very good question, Stefan. Thanks for that. So when we looked at that original flow infogram, it wasn't great quality, but there were 3 pathways: our training centre, our community projects, and the third pathway is through partner organisations. So we are keen, and already we're taking our new training courses out of our own control, and we're delivering them in partnership with other organisations. We've got a fantastic project in Zambia's only Borstal. Doesn't sound much fun, but there are 250 juvenile men in there, and we've got a program to give them a skill so that when they're released, they've got something to earn a living with. I'm very proud of that project, and we are looking for further opportunities to work with other training institutions and either train them in delivering our courses or deliver our courses at their locations. Second country is an objective. We were actually looking at Malawi when COVID arrived, and I think that's still in our sights, Tom, but it might be a couple of years before we get back onto it.
Oh, thank you. And then there's a question from Daniel, which I think, well, actually, before I ask that, anyone, if you do have any questions, please do put them in the questions, because it's good to have some conversation. But there's a question from Daniel, which maybe is not what you do, but it'd be good to get your thoughts. He's asked how would construction projects potentially support and provide dignity for displaced people? Is that something that is relevant in Zambia?
Well, internally displaced rather than refugees. I am aware that globally the number of displaced people is at an all-time high, I think, pretty much. We certainly don't have our construction approach designed to meet those kind of emergency needs. I know there's lots of other people working in that space, and I know, Tom, you've got experience there. But I think the training dimension certainly does have application. If people are forced into a camp type environment, there's absolutely no reason why training can't be delivered.
No, and yeah, I think often the best way to help people who are displaced is to help their livelihoods. Yeah. Because people will be able to rebuild their lives.
They need to, and at least they can take a skill back if they get a chance to return home.
Yeah. More questions coming in. There's Katerina has asked about, you touched on some of this, I think. Do you apply local construction codes, or do you actually introduce international codes and procedures that you use? You said you develop your own standards, but are they based on?
Yeah, where there are national standards. I mean, our buildings in the urban area, the training centre, they all have to get planning permission. That seems to be reasonably straightforward. I think, if anything, we exceed local building standards, and where they exist, I think they probably are pretty similar to what was inherited on independence 50 years ago. It's I think I'm happy on that side that we've got that we're working to a good level. Standards are so low, Katrina. It's anything is good, and that's why it's so. Any improvement is good, and I think that's why it's so important that trainees learning see what should be done. Because the traditional learning system is a sort of buddy up approach. You learn from your mate, your assistant. So bad habits get passed on.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's not our mission to raise standards, but if we're going to do a building, we want to do it to a good standard. Mm-hmm. And you guys wouldn't get involved with us. You wouldn't let us get away with shoddy workmanship, Tom.
No, absolutely not. And there's very good question from Richard about saying it's good to see women getting into the construction sector. What are the main trades that women tend to follow and is this an equal mixture? And he also asks other schools actually 50-50. What's the actual feed of, what are the other education opportunities for women?
Yeah, so just on the general education, yes, schools are 50-50 pretty much to the primary school level, but then as you hit secondary school level, you probably only got about 30% of Zambian children who make it certainly to the end of secondary school. Most will be dropping out after primary. And there the balance starts to shift with more boys coming through the system than girls. Girls particularly vulnerable to, leaving school once they hit puberty and pressure for early marriages and things. But there is work being done on that. So to end of primary school level, it's pretty well balanced. And then the other half of the question was around women in construction.
Yes, and what the main trades are that women are able or
yeah, well, painting is one of them, and we do painting. In fact, we think we're the only provider at the moment of certified, to a certified level of painting courses. It's a harder sector to get into, but women definitely are accepted there. Plumbing as well, we're researching at the moment cold water plumbing. We think that's going to be a good one for women. And then some of the more non-construction trades. So health and safety, 2 or 3 of our health and safety officers are women, and they do a good job. And stores management and moving that out. It's a tough ask for a woman to be a bricklayer in Zambia, tough ask here. And so those that want to do it, we'll welcome them. But really, we are pushing water uphill a little bit. So we do need to find other options.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. And a huge challenge, I think, across all different sectors is overcoming the multiple barriers to gender equality.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Never as simple as just changing one thing. The whole culture, a whole system has to change for things to be different.
But as we develop these links and build these relationships with the employers, that's where that creates the opportunities. They trust us. They say, because it's nothing to do with competence. It's absolutely nothing to do with competence. In fact, maybe the other way around. It's all to do with prejudice and accommodating separate latrines, having the right clothing and those sorts of things. There's lots of small things we can do to improve chances.
There's a technical question which you might not.
That's not me. That's you.
I'll ask it, and you can pass on it if it's not possible, if you don't know me. But Anthony's asked about using the soil stabilized blocks in any of your projects around constructing water tanks, whether you've done that before, and does it work, and how do you do it?
You know what, Anthony, you're right. We have done that a long time ago. We had a hand pressed stabilized soil block that was curved and designed for building round water tanks, and then you plaster it, and that does work. We don't do it habitually, but I have done that. It does work.
Yeah, I've actually done that too, and it does work. It's hard work.
yeah, that's right.
And then there's one more that's just come in. How has it been setting up work placements in the construction sector, and do contractors see benefits to doing it?
Yeah, good question. So before we made this big shift in 2017, we did a lot of research, and one of the primary things we did was go out and talk to employers. And I think we spoke to around 100, and we got around 30. About a third of them expressed an interest in what we wanted to do. They were sufficiently frustrated by the lack of skills available, and that they were curious. And this is from in the context of there's nothing going on here. They're not spending anything on training, okay, and not sending people off to school. So there's nothing really happening. There are no apprenticeship schemes. So that was encouraging enough for us to make a start. And my colleague Clayton's now been working on developing those relationships for 4 years. Some come and go, some come back each year, but we've definitely got a good, solid core group of employers who are into what we do. They like what we do, and they'll take more trainees each time. And part of that's being trusted, that you say, you can lay 50 blocks a morning straight to a good standard. You might be slow, but you're going to do it well. It won't need doing again. So they trust us, and by setting those expectations together, so they know that the trainees of our program can do ABC, so they'll take them. And that, you know, that's growing, that's steadily growing.
That's really good. Yeah. Then I think probably the last question, which I think is a good one to end on, is from Tom. And I'll add a little bit to it, but from Tom has asked, what potential do you see for engineering consultancies in places like the UK to help your organization, and what role could they play? And I'm also going to add to it, are there any other ways you think people can support Build It?
Well, we have been, we've been very, very pleased and appreciate the support we've had from Buro Happold, Arup, Gensler, Carillion. It's largely been through, you know, the high level technical support, particularly in concept design level for some of the buildings, and not the detailed drawings. We do those locally. When we've got the opportunity to do something a bit different, we've also had secondments, technical secondments, young professionals spending a year with us, learning management skills on the front line, and that's always been good value, our training centre. So there are occasional opportunities like that. We have a technical advisory group as well, to help deal with annual reviews and specific problems. So there are opportunities to get involved there. But I mean, I think generally, if you like what we do and you're interested in following what we do, sign up to the newsletter, you know, come to our events and just become part of the sort of Build It supporter community. You're very, very welcome.